Hi, welcome to Ikate's Crossing. As we continue with the experiential guide, we're doing the fifth insight, the message of the mystics. Wherein our adventurer and Marjorie face great danger as forces beyond their control threaten their lives. At the crossroads where they've coincidentally run into each other, soldiers tear through the area, arresting or killing Jensen's followers. Our man watches helplessly as Marjorie is captured and suddenly finds himself being hunted down. Splattered by the blood of another escaping man, he charges, terror-stricken up the mountain. Convinced of his imminent death, he surrenders to his fate, and as his ego opens to a higher self-energy, he enters a new world of expanded consciousness. Watching his pursuer inexplicably turn and walk down the mountain, he is filled with joy and wonder. On the highest peak of the mountain, he suddenly feels at one with everything, as if the world, the sun, and the sky were all part of his own body. In a vision, he witnesses the entire story of evolution, matter moving into greater forms of complexity, creating the exact conditions for each of us as an individual to emerge. His next encounter connects him to Father Sanchez, a friendly priest who becomes an ally in his further development. The fifth insight. More people will experience transcendent states. The fifth insight encourages us to experience firsthand the magnitude of the universe and our undeniable oneness with it. Doing so allows us to make a giant leap in understanding, even to glimpse the future. Within transcendent states, time, space, and natural laws are bypassed, and one experiences ineffable peace, love, and a feeling of truly being at home. The universe provides all we need if we are open to it. Until this century, the evolution of humanity, our physical size, the development of skills and technology, the structure of our societies, and our longer lifespan took place unconsciously. The enormously profound shift in the 20th century is that henceforth human evolution will occur consciously. The fifth insight predicts that at this historical period, more people will begin to attain non-ordinary states of consciousness, not just a few practitioners of esoteric traditions. No longer are we satisfied to just talk about these states. We now want direct experience, creativity rather than control. Linking with the universal source through intuition, we'll be guided to live from a place of creativity rather than control. The fifth insight solves the dilemma of the competition for power outlined in the fourth insight. As growing numbers of us are connected to and by spiritual energy, struggles for power by individuals and societies will be outgrown. This process will happen at first by fits and starts as we learn new ways of being. Surrender is the key that opens the door to no less than universal alignment. In the case of our adventurer, this oneness with all things arrived at through an extreme condition of fear, panic, and certainty that he is going to die. He has surrendered control and is willing to accept whatever happens next. Quite literally, his journey up to this point culminates in the death of an old consciousness and a rebirth into new possibilities. The fifth insight encourages us to practice attaining this consciousness without waiting for divine intervention or a life crisis. Our task is to begin opening a little at a time and to begin the journey toward that ultimate state of union. To do this, we are told to consciously fill up with the energy, because this energy brings on the coincidences, and the coincidences help us to actualize a new level on a permanent basis, raising the vibration. We can increase our connection to this energy by practicing being open, using our sense of appreciation and concentration on the sensation of being filled up. In the words of Father Sanchez, think about it. When something occurs beyond chance to lead us forward in our lives, we become more actualized people. We feel as though we are attaining what destiny is leading us to become. When this occurs, the level of energy that brought on the coincidences in the first place is instituted in us. We can be knocked out of it and lose energy when we are afraid, but this level serves as a new outer limit which can be regained quite easily. We have become a new person. We exist at a level of higher energy, at a level, get this, of higher vibration. As our character saw in the third insight, being in ancient forests and connecting with the powerful living energies of nature help us cross over into the higher vibrations. Some places increase energy more potently than others. This depends on how our energy shape fits with the energy of the place. Coming down. The fifth insight shows us that both the potential for the universal connection and the reasons we're unable to make our sustain that connection. An important part of the fifth insight is demonstrated when our character comes down from the mountain. Metaphorically, he re-enters the world of conflict. Guns, soldiers on patrol, relationships based on competition for energy. Majory proves to be his teacher in this as they begin to fall in love. Like a fledgling learning to fly, he has learned to stay aloft in the new current of energy. Others might drain him and cause him to have self-doubts. At one with the universe. Take a look at the specific details of our character's moments on the mountaintop. What can be applied? I felt this euphoric connection with everything, and this total kind of security and confidence. I was no longer tired. I felt light and secure and connected, like the whole landscape was part of me. Searching for the best way to describe the overall feeling, he says, I guess I felt a love for everything. His rapturous feeling parallels the ecstatic states of many Christian mystics and of near-death poets that describe becoming aware of the omnipresence of the divine in all living things. Accepting the universal energy of love. As he begins to practice regaining this feeling by focusing on the beauty of a nearby tree, he becomes confused about how to do it. He protests to the priest who is helping him. Love is something that just happens. I can't make myself love anything. The priest presses on with the lesson, clarifying the role of love. You do not make yourself love. You allow love to enter you. To do this, he says, one must position the mind of remembering what love felt like in the past and try to feel that love again. Valiantly, our character tries again, admiring the shape and presence of the tree. His appreciation for its beauty and uniqueness grows and grows until he can actually feel the emotion of love. Even though the tree is the focus of his attention, he has recreated a surrounding experience of love. As our character concentrates on the beauty of the tree, the priest can see that he is accepting the energy by observing the increase in his energy field. So far, our adventurer has achieved the ability to be open, to connect, to use a sense of appreciation, and to get the sensation of being filled up. Notice the dynamic of this event. Our character is not forcing the feeling of love, nor is he creating it artificially. The love is not going from him into the tree, the path we normally think love travels. Usually we tend to think of love as a feeling that is generated within ourselves going outward to the object of our love. With the fifth insight, we learn that in order to tap into universal energy, we must open ourselves to it. Open, we can receive energy, coincidences, and other gifts from universal intelligence. Connecting to the energy in small steps. As soon as our character begins to judge himself for not duplicating his experience on the mountains, his energy falls abruptly. The priest emphasizes that he must try to reconnect in small amounts. Releasing his doubts and judgments, he once again opens himself. Appreciating the beauty of the tree, he opens a little further. The feeling of appreciation for the form of the tree grows. This time he is successful, and the priest observes the energy flowing into him and flowing back into the tree. And in the words of the priest, when you appreciate the beauty and uniqueness of things, you receive energy. When you get to a level where you feel love, then you can send the energy back just by willing it so. In summary, an expanded state often begins to disintegrate when we try to interact with those in normal consciousness or resume living in a competitive world. However, even if we fall back to what we perceive as ordinary awareness, the mystical experience has forever changed our idea of our limits. We now have an example of another way of being that will help us as we discipline ourselves to regain this consciousness. Do you remember a time when you felt open, alive, and with appreciation for a scene in nature? Did you experience a sense of timelessness and connection to the earth? How long has it been since you've had an experience such as this? What has been keeping you from it? And if your answer is that time and the necessities of life have prevented you from this important connection to nature, consider the advice of Father Sanchez. Finding enough energy to maintain that state of love certainly helps the world, but it most directly helps us. It's the most hedonistic thing we can do. Sanchez points out that we must rethink our definition of love as something we do to make the world a better place. The real work of evolution is done when we are in a state of connection to the universal energy for ourselves. In this feeling, we exist at a higher vibration and consequently are more able to live our purpose. Together with others resonating at these levels, we automatically change the world view. Individually, we contribute to evolution through a process of filling up with energy, moving ahead through coincidences, filling up again and moving ahead again. Close encounters with evolution. Since the 1960s, interest in the paranormal has burgeoned. As the fifth insight predicted, there's been a huge growth in the literature on phenomena such as extrasensory ability, verifiable accounts of past lives, near-death and out-of-body experiences, and mystical experiences obtained through spiritual practice. More people than ever before are willing to discuss their personal encounters with invisible, mysterious forces. Movies contribute to bringing these ideas into mainstream by using such themes as reincarnation, ghosts, and spiritual review after death. Surprisingly, even sports offers fertile ground for the occurrence of non-ordinary states. In the fascination book, The Psychic Sides of Sport, co-authored by Ilson founder Michael Murphy and Rhea A. White, we eavesdrop on the amazing stories of some of the most accomplished athletes and adventurers in the world. The book's table of contents alone reads like a description of our characters' experience. Mystical sensations of acute well-being, peace, detachment, wastelessness, ecstasy, being in the present, distinctive action and surrender, mystery and awe, unity, ultra perception of size and field and time, and exceptional energy. Since the intuitive spiritual world is all too often derailed into a marginal position in our culture, it is important to understand that changes in consciousness take place in all spheres of life. In the following reports, we hear athletes describe the same sensations as those reported by spiritual adepts and by our character on his mountaintop. Ecstasy, a peak and a foundation. In the fifth insight, our man's feeling of ecstasy on the mountain becomes a foundation for recreating the connection. However, non-ordinary states may also occur in everyday life. Peak experiences in sports, for example, can be used as starting points for building energy. When you wish to enter in a high level of energy, remember back to when you experienced joy and ecstasy in a sport. Use this feeling to help tap into the universal energy in the incremental way suggested by the priest in the novel. For example, Murphy and White quote such athletes as quarterback Francis Bankington, who says that he played football for one reason: I loved it. I love it. Nothing in my life compares to the ecstasies I got from this game. Skiers tell you of the magic moment when you are right on the mark, and everything falls into place, and the only sensation you feel is the ecstasy of what you're doing. Skiers, skiing, skied are one. Mountain climbers have a natural leg up in this quest for spiritual heights. The simplest climbs make me crazy with joy. The mountains were a sort of magical kingdom, where by some spell I felt happiest. An account of a sexual ascent of Annapurna by Maurice Herzog with Pierre Lachenal closely parallels our character's experience. I felt as though I were plunging into something new and quite abnormal. I had the strangest and most vivid experiences, such as I'd never known before known in the mountains. There was something unnatural in the way I saw Lachenal and everything around us. All sense of exertion was gone, as though there were no longer any gravity. The funniest landscape, the quintessence of purity. These were not the mountains I knew, they were the mountains of my dreams. Swift and rhythmic movement, two key triggers for producing esoteric states, are found in other activities, such as jogging, flying, riding, and surfing. The ecstatic states is also contained in trance dancing, chanting and drumming, and shamanic practices, Eastern religions such as Sufi tradition. Weightlessness. The feeling of floating and being outside one is a common feature of a mystical experience and of athletic peak experience. Many runners report that they are often reach a point after prolonged exertion of wanting to float and fly. One long-distance runner had 600 miles of running, suddenly had the slight feeling. I felt as though I was going through space, treading on clouds. Long before Westerners were donning Nikes and sweatpants and practicing for marathons, Tibetan monks were undergoing a special meditation training called Lungompa that resulted in incredible feats of endurance and speed. After years of practice in the secret law, these monks attained an altered state of consciousness in which they could run for several consecutive days and nights over treacherous mountain terrain. Unlike marathoners who train physically, Lungompa monks train for this type of trance running by entering meditation cubicles, which are then sealed up for periods of months or years. They live in silence with no physical training, receiving only gifts of food through an opening about 9 or 10 inches. It is said that the monk's body, after several years, becomes so light and subtle that he can exit through this opening. Surrendering. The mystical experience takes us out of the need for control. The oneness of mind, body, and spirit lies in surrender. In The Joy of Spirits, Michael Novick writes, this is one of the great inner secrets of sports. There is a certainty point of unity within the self, and between the self and its world a certain complicity and magnetic mating, a certain harmony that conscious mind will cannot direct. Commanded by instinct is swifter, subtle, deeper, and more accurate, more in touch with reality than command by conscious mind. The discovery takes one's breath away. As athletes share their experiences, our collective evolution is quickened and expanded. Basketball player Patsy Neal captures the spirit of the fifth insight in her book, Sport and Identity, when she wrote it in 1972. There are moments of glory that go beyond the human expectation, beyond the physical and emotional ability of the individual. Something unexplainable takes over and breathes life into the known life. One stands on the threshold of miracles that one cannot create voluntarily. Call it a state of grace or an act of faith or an act of God. It is there and the impossible becomes possible. The athlete goes beyond herself. She transcends the natural. She touches a piece of heaven and becomes the recipient of power from an unknown source. The performance almost becomes a holy place. Where a spiritual awakening seems to take place, the individual becomes swept up in the action around her. She almost floats through the perfect performance, drawing on forces she has never previously been aware of. The Eastern Connection. A major contribution to spiritual awakening in the West has been made by those who begin to study and practice Eastern philosophy via Zen meditation, Hatha yoga, the martial arts, acupuncture, and other healing disciplines. As the fifth insight predicts, this influx of information about the mind-body connection has contributed significantly to expanding our perception of the world. Even splashy karate and kung fu movies serve to break down the barrier of the mind-body separation so ingrained in the West. With the Eastern perspective of mind-body unity, we gain a tremendous tool for accessing the unlimited range of universal energy, variously called chi, ki, or prana. Discipline and intention make this path available to all who wish to apply themselves. Evolutionary power surges. In his spiritual awakening on the mountaintop, our character has also experienced a rush of energy up his spine. This inherent energy available to all of us is called Kundalini in the Indian spiritual tradition, represented by the image of a coiled snake lying dormant at the base of the spine. It is pure creative energy and is seen as no less than the moving force of evolution. When awakened, the energy rushes up the spinal cord, activating the energy centers of the body and releasing various emotional and physical sensations. Carl Jung, who studied many forms of mysticism, believed it would take thousands of years before it would be commonplace in the West. According to psychiatrist Stanislav Grof, however, future development showed this estimate to be wrong. Whether this can be attributed to accelerated evolution, popularity, and the rapid spread of various forms of spiritual practice, pressure of the dangerous environmental crisis, or the facilitating effect of psychedelic drugs, it is quite clear that the unmistakable sign of Kundalini awakening can be observed these days in thousands by Westerners. The marriage of the Eastern attunement with universal flow being and the Western ability to act on new information doing is a major aspect of the trend towards wholeness that is so central to an emerging spirituality. Together, harmony of thought and action takes us to a new levels of evolution. Dimensions of consciousness. Our adventurous experience on the mountain is part of a family of transcendent events, ranging from merging spatial boundaries with other people, plants, and inorganic matter, but through transcending boundaries of linear time and space. As we know, the pace of the evolution of consciousness was facilitated by broad social unrest in the 1960s because we were so detached from the sacred view of life. Interest in alternative perspectives and freedoms created a climate of revelation, renunciation of tradition, and a certain amount of social havoc. Travels into other dimensions of consciousness via drugs, for example, had no stabilizing context, unlike the indigenous cultures whose use of substances was ritualized and spiritualized. The search for the transcendent experience is one of the most powerful instincts in the human psyche. As the fifth insight reveals, conscious desire for direct experience continues to grow in the last half of the century. Researchers have since developed alternative non-drug techniques using the breath, music, and bodywork to invoke transpersonal healing experiences. Sounding much like a character in the novel, one of the Groff students using breathwork reported, "There was no question that I, the earth, was a living organism, intelligent being, trying to understand myself, struggling to evolve to a higher level of awareness and attempting to communicate with other cosmic beings. I felt in my body the injury of the industrial insults of mining, urbanization, toxic and radioactive waste, and pollution of air and water. The strangest part of the session was that I was aware of rituals among various Aboriginal peoples and experienced them as very healing, absolutely vital for myself. During my experience, it was extremely convincing that doing rituals is important for the earth. Transpersonal states as these added to the growing awareness of evolutionary crossroads. As these non-ordinary states of awareness find wider acceptance and change our collective belief systems, they help transform human culture. Tools for transformation. Self-exploration through meditation and regression therapy, as well as research in parapsychology and out-of-body and near-death experiences, clarify the nature of mystical experience. In addition, we are now seeing a dramatic increase of interest in shamanic practices. Indigenous peoples have always viewed non-ordinary states of consciousness as an experiential connection to the cosmos, during which guidance is received. Westerners who study this lore and work with Native people are helping to keep these traditions alive. Researchers in the psycho-spiritual domain believe that we are poised for yet another explosion in understanding. Involving consciously. The availability now of ancient techniques as well as other psychotherapeutic methods give us a tool to work individually on our personal evolution. We must cross one by one the barrier of our Western intellectual framework that labels non-ordinary states as bizarre or even pathological. As more of us avail ourselves of these paths and share our experiences, we make it easier for others to go forward as well. Groff writes, there are important realms of reality that are transcendental, transphenomenal. The impulse in human beings to connect with the spiritual domain is an extremely powerful and important force. It resembles in its nature sexuality, but is much more fundamental and compelling. Denial and repression of this transcendental impulse introduces a serious distortion into human life on both an individual and collective scale. Experiential self-exploration is an important tool for a spiritual and philosophical quest. It can mediate the connection with the transpersonal domain of one's own being and of existence. Spontaneous illumination. While years may be spent in the pursuit of higher consciousness through a variety of spiritual practices, many people also have a complete spontaneous connection with the divine. For example, psychotherapist Donna Hale tells this story. About 18 years ago, I was studying for a college exam, and after several hours, I felt absolutely drained. I went outside in the garden to meditate. As I sat down, I was aware of the beauty of the flowers around me. Their simplicity and colour really stood out. I guess in contrast to all the words I'd been reading at the time. I didn't really know how to meditate, so I just closed my eyes with the intention of being still. Immediately, I felt the sensation of something pouring over me, a clarity, a peacefulness. I felt this tremendous buoyancy that seemed to elevate me to a state of ecstasy. When I opened my eyes after a few minutes, I felt as if there was no separation between me and all the things in my life. I felt that everything was working just as it was meant to be, and that I was connected to it. I felt like I knew everything. This feeling lasted about 30 minutes and dissolved when I had to go back to studying. Hale remembers that it felt as if a door had suddenly opened up, allowing her to touch the fabric of consciousness. It always kept me looking for it again. Opening the door. Many of us are asking the question, how can I find my life's work? In what meaningful way can I contribute to the world? Often people see these questions in terms of career choices. While many will choose careers as practitioners and teachers in alternative fields, it is important to realize that our desire to serve the planet, which best be approached by working on our own spiritual development and consciousness. Whether we change jobs might be less important than bringing in new spiritual awareness to the jobs we have. Our present situation might be the perfect place to practice our commitment to connect with our inner source, without specifically setting about to change things. We can ready ourselves by devoting time to practice that assist our opening up to our true energy, such as meditation, the martial arts, yoga, therapeutic dance, and movement, breathing exercises and bodywork, spending time in sacred sites, and surrounding oneself with beauty and energy could be the most important in clarifying a sense of personal mission. Seed experiences. In his second book, Heading Towards Omega, in search of the meaning of the near-death experience, Kenneth Ring develops a hypothesis consistent with the fifth insight. Studying the long-term effects of near-death experiences, he concludes that these experiences might assist the overall transformation of consciousness on the planet. He believes that near-death experiences, NDE, are equivalent to seeds in the lives of those who have them, gradually flowering into deeper spiritual growth. Striking in their similarities, these experiences are remarkable for the understanding of life and death that they reveal to the person in crisis. The person typically becomes aware of the death of his body, its subsequent entry into the indescribable light of joy and love. Significance of the NDE phenomenon is multidimensional. At one level, the NDE is the personal experience of death as an ecstatic encounter with loving beings of light and possibly a reunion with departed loved ones. This rapturous aspect of the NDE is a reassuring and liberating phenomenon, as well documented. At another level, however, the NDE serves as an important contribution in the advance of evolution. Ring's hypothesis is that near-death experiences not only change the lives of survivors, but that their transformed consciousness may help catalyze an acceleration of human spiritual evolution. Perhaps the most significant change in consciousness is the awareness of survival of consciousness flowing physical death. A woman who almost died during the birth of her second child reported, "The next thing I knew I was standing in a mist, and I knew immediately that I had died, and I was so happy that I felt that I had died, that I felt alive. And I cannot tell you how I felt. It was, oh God, I'm dead, but I'm here, I'm me. I was filled with nothing but these feelings of gratitude, because I still existed, and yet I knew perfectly well that I had died. I remember I knew that everything, everywhere in the universe was okay. The plan was perfect, that whatever was happening, the wars, famine, whatever, was okay. Later in the experience, she described meeting a being whom she did not know. She was told there were no sins, not in the way you think about them on earth. The only thing that matters is how you think. A recurring theme in the NDE is life review, which makes an important imprint upon the survivor, contributing to a changed consciousness in the subsequent life. This detailed life review, while always given without judgment, drives home such points as the importance of being loving towards others, the importance of human relationships and love over material things. People are often shocked by seeing forgotten little episodes from their lives that reveal a thoughtless or hurtful action that did not seem important at the time. These reviews demonstrate how each person is sent to earth to learn certain lessons or attempt to fulfill a particular purpose. One man in Ring's book saw not detailed events, but every emotion he'd ever felt, and my eyes were showing me the basis of how that emotion affected my life. What my life had done so far to affect other people's lives, using the feeling of pure love that was surrounding me as the point of comparison. You know I've done a horrible job using love as the point of comparison. Looking at yourself from the point of how much love you have spread to other people is devastating. You will never get over it. I'm 6 years away from that day of his NDE, and I'm not over it yet. These reports reveal how the beginning of a new spiritual awareness carried by these survivors will inevitably begin to permeate beyond their individual lives in terms of the evolution of consciousness. These people are in the forefront. Continued flowering. Ring interviewed over 150 near-death survivors and concluded that among the primary characteristics they showed was an attitude of increased spirituality, not necessarily religious in nature. They were convinced that life continues after the material transition through death, and felt an inward closeness to God. The importance of a spiritual awakening is not just the specific event of the blissful state. Its real significance is that it continues to function as the active organizing principle in one's evolution. Perhaps we might imagine these states as analogous to the birth of an interior faculty that helps one to send and receive energy, turning into intuitive guidance. The long-term effects of NDEs and other mystical experiences tend to be an increase in psychic sensitivity, and frequencies of synchronicities, gateways to higher consciousness. Higher consciousness is what distinguishes the mystical journey as not always the result of spiritual discipline or meditative practice. As we have seen, it can be triggered by being close to death, experiencing a personal trauma, or even just by closing one's eyes for a moment of introspection. Characteristics common to these states are seeing a dazzling light accompanied by a feeling of joy, feeling absolutely secure in love, feeling ecstatic, a feeling of lightness, buoyancy, understanding intuitively how the universe works, releasing all fears of death, seeing the life continuum of life. As you practice direct connection to universal energy, the most important measures are a background feeling of love, not connected to any one object, and contact with your interior knowing or hunches. If you're truly connected, you'll feel true love. Otherwise, you're not in contact with your source. A changing consciousness. Common changes that occur in the lives of those who have had mystical experiences may be summarized as feeling connected to a higher source, shifting interest from material accumulation, enhanced appreciation of beauty in other people, enhanced abilities, desire to learn, enhanced extrasensory ability, sense of mission, a lack of self-consciousness, and ability to inspire others. The summary of the fifth insight. The fifth insight is the experience of inner connections with divine energy. By exploring and pursuing our divinity within, we can personally make contact with the type of experience called mystical. In our search for this altered state, we distinguish between intellectual description of this awareness and the awareness itself. In this regard, we apply certain experiential measures which indicate we are in connection with the universal energy. For instance, do we experience a lightness of body? Do we feel light on our feet? Buoyant? Do we experience a vividness of perception such as enhanced colors, smells, tastes, sounds, a sense of beauty? Do we experience a sense of oneness, total security? And above all, do we experience a state of awareness called love? Not towards someone or something, but as a constant background sensation in our lives. No longer do we want to talk about mystical awareness. We have the courage to apply these measures to really seek this connection with the divine. It is this connection with total energy that resolves all conflict. We no longer need energy from others. That's it from me. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be released. Take care and blessed be.